This is your host, Bad Takes. Excited to get into the Week 1 results, what happened last night to the Baltimore Ravens, as well as what to expect in this Monday Night Football game with the Bears and the Vikings. Excited to dive into that. We'll wait a little bit for people to dive in, and then we'll get into everything. While we're waiting, make sure that you subscribe to this channel. We're on our road to our first 100 subscribers. We're doing a giveaway of a Bluetooth speaker to one of my subscribers. So make sure you subscribe, like, comment, and chat. Tell me what you thought about Week 1. Who was your team? How did they do? Let's get into that and much more. All right, let's dive into things. Like I said, the first thing we're going to talk about today is what happened to the Baltimore Ravens last night. Last night, the first Sunday night football game of the season in Buffalo, Josh Allen faced off against Lamar Jackson, and seemingly going into probably halfway through the fourth quarter, it looked like it was going to be a huge Ravens victory. If you were to ask the Bills fans that left that game in the fourth quarter before the end of the game, they would tell you they thought this game was over. But let me tell you, it wasn't even close. Myself, as a Ravens fan, I'll get into how I feel about this game, but I can tell you, I never thought this game was over. I've seen this story way too many times. It's like a deja vu nightmare that happens over and over to the Ravens, having big leads and just continuously losing those leads and losing the game in a heartbreaking way. First thing I have to say, though, is the fact that I have to give my flowers to the Bills. Josh Allen had a stellar game. He threw for almost 400 yards in this game, and they just never gave up. There were so many opportunities for the Bills to fold and say, hey, this isn't our week. Let's pack it up. Let's get ready for Week 2. They were down by more than 2 scores for a long period of time of this game, including parts of the fourth quarter. And they came out with 16 unanswered points with a game-winning field goal to win the game at the end of this game. I can tell you right now, they had one lucky touchdown, but really to me, the Ravens gave up this game to the Bills. The Ravens had this game in their pocket and just said, hey, Josh Allen, go ahead and take this. We don't want this victory. This is totally up to you. Go ahead and grab it from us. And I can tell you right now, as a Ravens fan, I am sick of this. I just can't watch games like this anymore. This was a Sunday night game. I lost sleep over this. I probably fell asleep around 3 a.m. last night just because I was so mad, right? All offseason, we talk about how perfectly made this roster is, how they built this team for success, how they're ready to take the next step. And what happens in the first game? We go out to a big lead. Derrick Henry had a monster game. 165 yards on the ground, a couple touchdowns, absolutely dominated this game on the ground. Really what was having a Hall of Fame game up until the fourth quarter where in a must-need situation, Derrick Henry fumbled the ball in Ravens territory, which allowed the Bills to have an easy score, taking off very minimal time on this game. I have to tell you, again, Lamar Jackson, he also had an amazing game. He had a near-perfect passer rating. His passer rating was 144. He had 3 incompletions in this game, right? He threw for over 200 yards and added like another 65 on the ground and a touchdown. He had 3 total touchdowns in this game, and they still found a way to lose this game. The first things I have to say about this is Jair Alexander, that guy is a liability. I said this earlier in a YouTube short rant. Jair Alexander had by far the worst game for the Baltimore Ravens. He was either getting burnt, he lost some guys behind him, he was caught, he had a couple penalties, and just gave up this game. I know at the end of this game, the Ravens were in a bend but don't break defense, but he was he was in a break and break defense. That guy just continuously allowed his man to get behind him or to get open. And it was awful. The other thing I have to say, and I'm not sure if other Ravens fans noticed this or saw this, but Roquan Smith looks terrible out there. That guy was supposed to bounce back this year. Apparently was injured last year and was dealing with a lot of bumps and bruises that sort of harnessed his playing ability. But he was slow in this game. He was missing tackles. He looked like a liability out there as well. I'm really worried about Roquan Smith. I truly am. I don't see how he's going to be able to improve. This is week 1. He's supposed to be at his healthiest. He's supposed to be spry and moving quick. And what I saw was a lackadaisical, slow middle linebacker that has seen the best of his days. I know he's still young, but I just don't see it. I really don't. I feel like that guy has fallen off. Now, on the other side, Keon Coleman, I would say, had an awesome game for the Bills. Right? Their offense wasn't really moving the ball a lot. They got a lot of big plays in big situations. That's the biggest difference to me between the Ravens and the Bills, is the Bills took advantage of crucial situations, and sometimes with a little bit of luck, right? One time they had Josh Allen scrambled out to his right, was being chased down by a couple defenders, and he threw a ball into the end zone. He got tipped by his own player. Dawson Knox tipped the ball. And instead of it going out of balance or potentially being an incomplete pass, it fell right into Keon Coleman's lap, who still had to make a play in order to catch that ball. But to me, they take advantage of situations like that. The Bills score touchdowns on situations like that. The Ravens had crucial drops on third down situations or second down situations where they could have made it a shorter third down situation or getting into Bills territory. They also had 2 dropped interceptions that really could have changed the game and closed the game for the Ravens, and they just couldn't do it, right? Justice Hill, he had a fumble and lost the ball for like 9 yards. I never see Justice Hill make mistakes like that. To me, he's one of the most what's the word? He's one of those people that people don't expect to play well, but he always produces for the Ravens. He's been a guy that always shows up when needed, and this is probably the worst game I've ever seen Justice Hill play. I love that guy. He dropped a crucial pass. He fumbled the ball. He did gain the ball back, but again, he lost 9 yards on that play, and it just slowed down our offense. The fourth quarter, the Ravens' offense was non-existent. And after having such a prolific first 3 quarters, it doesn't make sense to me. I'm looking at this game, and I'm trying to figure out, what is the situation here? Because I think all Ravens fans know this happens all the time. I remember John Harbaugh being asked about this last year. They're like, why do teams generally come from behind and win games in fashions like this when you're up by multiple scores? And his response was, this will happen because we are always up. And so more often than not, there's going to be an opportunity for a team to come from behind. If we were coming from behind all the time, this wouldn't be the case. But generally, the Ravens are always up in games, right? Again, Derrick Henry had an amazing game. Lamar Jackson had an amazing game. I don't put this game on Lamar Jackson. Derrick Henry, you obviously have some responsibility in the sense that you had that crucial fumble. Tyler Loop, he's another guy that hurt this team in a way, right? He had some crucial field goal makes, but he missed an extra point that made it so that we were up by 2 at the end of the game instead of up by 3. The Bills would have tied that game if Tyler Loop hit that extra point, and we would have gone to overtime, and who knows what would have happened in that situation. Personally, I thought the Bills had all the momentum, so they probably would have ended up winning that game, but still at the same time, the Ravens gave that game to the Bills in every sense of the word. Again, those Bills fans had piled out. That stadium was half full by the end of that game when the Bills won that game, right? It was crazy to see that. I had never seen the Bills stadium like that. I will say that. But at the same time, it's just How do you let that happen as a Ravens team over and over? I have to say this. I think the Ravens just don't have a clutch gene. I'm not sure if this is on John Harbaugh and the culture he's created and his coaching style and the play calls they have at the end of games, but you can't dominate a game for 3 quarters, get into a situation where you're trying to waste clock, and you do an end around to a 5'10", 180-pound wide receiver that just lays down instead of trying to get yards and gets hit. He avoided a hit. And I'm talking about Zay Flowers, another guy that had a great game for the Ravens. He had 6 catches for over 130 yards and a touchdown in that game. And still at the end of the game, he found a way to just give the game back to the Bills. Again, I'm just sick of this as a Ravens fan. And you have to say this is a perfect example of why the Ravens cannot make it to the Super Bowl. This is a perfect snapshot of that. Josh Allen, I know he's struggling to get there, but he never gave up in this game. He continued fighting, and he found a way to win for the Bills. They weren't really able to run the ball that much. I think James Cook had an okay game at best. But Josh Allen was extending plays with his legs. He was finding open players down the field, and he found a way to win that game. And that's really all there is to it, right? The Ravens just can't go into seasons with a game like this. This is already going to be in the back of their mind every single game the rest of this season. They cannot find a way to turn the page and progress. They cannot find a way to be clutch in big games. This was a playoff atmosphere. I know this is week 1, but this is a type of game where you are fighting for field position or for home field position in the playoffs. And if they play the Bills, more often than not, they're probably going to be more likely to be playing in Buffalo in the playoffs after this game because they're going to have that tiebreaker, and they're going to have a better record in the AFC over top of the Ravens. They have such an easy schedule. This was a must-win game for the Ravens because the Bills have like the 5th easiest schedule in the NFL. The AFC East is not a good division. The Miami Dolphins got completely crushed by the Indianapolis Colts. We'll get into that. They might be the worst team in the NFL after watching that game. Like Tua, he played okay, but he also had a fumble and 2 interceptions. Again, the Bills are just going to have such an easy road. The Ravens were probably the toughest matchup on their schedule, and they pulled out that win. And they just have to be so happy about it. And as a Ravens organization, you have to be sick right now. I watched Kyle Van Noy after the game in his own podcast, and you could see it on his face. He has no answers. No one has an answer for this. And all I can say is that there's just not a clutch gene. It reminds me of, like, they remind me of, like, the Los Angeles Clippers. They have all this talent, but when push comes to shove and they're in crucial situations, they fold. I can't even defend it anymore. Like, I'm a big John Harbaugh fan, but I can't defend him because he has to have some sort of responsibility in this. I know he's not out there on the field, but he's doing something that makes it so that they continuously are found in this sort of situation. This has to change for the Ravens if they want to have any chance of success or any hopes of ever making the Super Bowl, because I just can't see them winning in big games. I don't trust it. Like I was telling my wife, I was like, I'm not going to watch Ravens night games anymore. It's just miserable to watch because at 11 o'clock at night, I'm having an anxiety attack over if we're going to win the game when we're up by 15 points. That should be a no-brainer. But I'm still sitting here talking to you about how the Ravens lost that game, 41-40. It just doesn't make sense. And it's killing me. And I'll say this one last time. They need to figure something out, and they need to figure out something fast. And it's going to be some soul searching. The Ravens really need to do some soul searching here because, again, it's not a talent issue. It's a heart issue. It's a mentality issue because they fold in the worst situations. Oh, sorry, guys. I just had to get that off my chest. We'll dive into the Monday Night Football game. Before I dive into this Monday Night Football game, make sure to comment below Who do you think had the best win in week 1 so far? Again, I know we have this Monday Night Football game coming up, but there are some big games that happened yesterday. There are some teams that pulled out some huge victories, and I'll go over them more. But again, please comment below. Tell me who you thought had the best victory in week 1 so far. It would be really help me out, and I would love to talk about that. Let's dive into this Monday Night Football game. The Minnesota Vikings are traveling to Chicago to play the Chicago Bears. Now, in this game, the obvious story and what I'm looking at here is the fact that you have 2 second-year quarterbacks going head-to-head in week 1. And this is a unique situation in the sense that Caleb Williams, who started last year for the Bears, had what I would consider a really good rookie season, just couldn't find ways to win games at the end of the day, has a brand new head coach in Ben Johnson, who was the offensive guru for the Lions, and we'll talk more about that later on. But he has a brand new system that he's working in, and this is the first day where he's really got to work out all those kinks in a real live situation. Now, I know he played a little bit in preseason, but this is a completely different ballgame when you're playing against a starting defense. And the Vikings defense is a really good one. They are a stellar defense that really knows how to game plan and stop offenses, especially in where they're really good. Now, on the other side, you have J.J. McCarthy, again, a second-year quarterback who was drafted in the first round and had a really good preseason. I would say his rookie year wasn't as exciting this past season, but now he has the keys to the car, right? Sam Darnold is gone. It is J.J. McCarthy's team. And this is his first regular season game. And I know a lot of people are hopeful to see what comes of J.J. McCarthy in this game. But to me, I have my reservations because, again, anyone playing in their first regular season game, you never know what's going to happen, right? I know he's been in crucial situations in college for the Michigan Wolverines, but this is a whole different ball game. He's got Montez Sweat that's going to be breathing down his neck for this game, right? The Bears also have a pretty good defense. I would say a solid defense that could really impact J.J. McCarthy and make this a tough game for him. Now, what I will say is, for me, I think both of these teams have really good wide receiving cores, right? The Minnesota Vikings are going to miss Jordan Addison, but I love the fact that they got Adam Thielen back. I'm surprised that the Panthers gave up Adam Thielen for what they did, considering he was their top receiver last year. It sounds to me like he wanted to leave and was happy to get back to Minnesota, his hometown, and where he played with the Vikings for the longest time. But to me, again, Thielen and Justin Jefferson need to make this game easier for J.J. McCarthy. So does Hawkinson. The tight end needs to have a really good game and just make this game easier for J.J. McCarthy. Aaron Jones, the same thing. Because, again, he's going into a hostile environment, a team where there's a lot of hopes in Chicago, right? There's probably more slander than needed around Caleb Williams and what he's going to be able to do in this offense for the Bears. But they have a good team. Their roster is pretty built up. And, again, they have DJ Moore and they have Rome Odunze out there. So Rome Odunze is a key player in this game for me, right? The Bears let Keenan Allen walk. And I know DJ Moore is probably set to be the wide receiver 1, but they drafted Rome Odunze to be wide receiver 1 for them. So he's a big player that I'm going to be looking for to see how he performs in this game. Because to me, if Rome Odunze has wide receiver 1 type numbers, if he's able to get, I'll say 80 yards and a touchdown in this game, I would bet a lot of money that the Bears would win this game. I think that would be a huge tell for the Bears, is if Rome Odunze has a good game in this game. Now, on the other side, I think it's the same thing. I think a big player to watch in this game is Justin Jefferson. If Justin Jefferson is able to have a 100-plus yard game and 1 touchdown, that tells me that J.J. McCarthy played to the ability that he needed to in order to win this game. Because I'll be honest, as a media pundit, if you will, as a fan, as a bystander that doesn't have ties to either one of these teams, this is a really tough game to determine and predict who's going to win this game. I think both of these teams have a lot of talent, but both of these teams also have a lot of unknowns, right? How is J.J. McCarthy actually going to perform in the regular season? Is he going to be a preseason hero, like a preseason All-Pro that just doesn't perform in the regular season? Or is he going to take the league by storm and be considered one of the best quarterbacks out of this class? Now, that's a tough thing to do, right? Jaden Daniels, again, Caleb Williams. I would say Drake May didn't have the best game, and we'll talk more about that as well. But J.J. McCarthy has to prove himself in this game. Because, again, the Vikings let Sam Darnold walk, and I know Sam Darnold didn't have the best game himself this week, but he's the only one there, right? You have to count on J.J. McCarthy to perform in this game if you're the Vikings and want to win this game. When it comes to a prediction for this, again, I really do think this game could go either way, but if I had to really put my finger on it and give you a number, I'm going to go 24-21 Bears in this game. I think Caleb Williams is going to have a really good game. I think their defense is going to give J.J. McCarthy a tough time and make it hard for him to be consistent out there. I think he's going to have some touchdown drives, obviously. But again, to me, the Bears, just with the experience, even though he's still a second-year quarterback, he's been able to play in these games. He's dealt with so much, I would say, hate from the media and just the public in general, Caleb Williams has, and I think he's handled it pretty well. So, again, I'm going 24-21 Bears over the Vikings in this Monday Night Football game. Let's talk about this Miami Dolphins Indianapolis Colts game, right? Miami Dolphins Indianapolis Colts. I think anyone, when going into this game, more than likely probably thought the Dolphins would win this game out, right? The Dolphins just have a prolific passing game with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Tua Tagovailoa. But at the same time, that was definitely not the case, right? Tua had 3 turnovers in this game. He had 2 interceptions, and he had a lost fumble. And I also have to give my flowers to Daniel Jones on the other side. Daniel Jones threw for 272 yards and a touchdown in this game. The Indianapolis Colts won this game 33-8. The Dolphins didn't score until a garbage time touchdown by Devon Achane, right? This Miami Dolphins team is in a panic mode. I can tell you that right now. I watched Tua presser, I watched the Mike McDaniel presser, and what I saw was people that just didn't have answers. There wasn't something they could put their finger on and say, hey, we just need to do this better. They need to do everything better. And Mike McDaniel, when he was talking to the media, you could just see it in his face. He had no answers. He took responsibility for it. He said, hey, this is my job to get this team better. But to me, this team is 4 losses in a row away from them just hanging the towel and saying it's time to rebuild. If they continuously struggle like this for the beginning of this season, Tyreek Hill is going to get traded. That's obvious to me. Like Tyreek, they're going to go into rebuild mode because they have Tua Tagovailoa, who they gave a contract to. They have a talented Jalen Waddle, a talented Devon Achane, who is an extremely talented running back, but also great from a receiving perspective. But they just can't win games. And again, they're in the AFC East as well. The toughest matchup they have is the Bills, right? So you have to play the Bills twice a year, but you still have the other 2 teams that you get to play twice a year as well. And to me, I just don't know if they're going to be able to beat teams like the Patriots twice in a season. I just don't know if I see that, right? They lost to the Indianapolis Colts, who had Daniel Jones as their quarterback. No one was thinking Daniel Jones was going to be able to produce for the Colts. Everyone was thinking the Colts were going to have a down year this year, right? When Daniel Jones beat out Anthony Richardson, everyone was like, just sign them off. They're like, okay, no chance this team wins more than 5 games this year, me included. And they had a great game to start this out. The Miami Dolphins looked unprepared. They looked unmotivated. And it was obvious throughout this entire game. Again, they only scored in garbage time. So to me, I'm panicking if I'm a Miami Dolphins fan. I'm panicking if I'm in that locker room. Because if they don't turn this around fast, again, I said this before in another video, I see this team going into rebuild mode after this year. And they might start doing it sooner rather than later. They might try to send Tyreek, who knows, maybe even back to the Chiefs on a cheap trade in order to get that salary cap off. Because they're going to have to rebuild. And the Colts, to me, showed maybe they should be taken more seriously. I apologize to the Colts. Like Michael Pittman, he had a great game for the Colts. Tyler Warren, I expected he also had a great game for the Colts. Jonathan Taylor did everything he needed to do from a run game perspective to be successful. And again, Daniel Jones had a great game. You just can't have this type of start for a team like the Miami Dolphins, a team that was already having huge issues in the locker room, having huge confidence and, I would say, cohesive issues. This was a terrible start, but it also proves the fact that they do have these problems. It is not a talent issue. It's a team issue. It's a working together issue. And they're going to have to turn this around fast. We'll see what happens in week 2. But again, if I were to make a power rankings, I would have Miami near the bottom of my list. And they do not have that from a roster perspective on paper. It just doesn't make sense to me. Let's go ahead and dive into the battle for Ohio, right? I'm talking about the Browns versus the Bengals. First thing I'll say, the Bengals winning this game 16-17 is a shocker to me. And if you were to tell me Joe Burrow would throw for 113 yards, I would bet all of my money that the Bengals would have lost that game. I really would have. Joe Burrow throwing for 113 yards and the Bengals still winning that game is a statistical anomaly. The Bengals punted the ball 6 times to the Browns' 2 punts. The biggest difference in this game obviously was turnovers. There was a turnover on downs, but then there was also a missed field goal. There was Joe Flacco throwing 2 interceptions. One of them was like a freak interception, right? But at the same time, it was turnovers, it was missed field goals, it was missed kicks that really led to this. Like Myles Garrett, he had 2 sacks in this game. He was punishing Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow was getting hit pretty often, and he just stuck in that game, and they won this game in a nail-biter. This was not the type of game the Bengals normally win. You know, I've been hating on the Bengals defense all offseason. I still don't think they're a good defense, right? They played against the Browns, but they found a way to win this game for the Bengals. It wasn't Joe Burrow that won that game for them. It was actually the defense and causing turnovers and also a little bit of luck with the Browns rookie kicker missing an extra point and a field goal. That game was a huge game in the AFC North because of the fact that the Steelers won and the Ravens lost. The Bengals have been getting off to slow starts historically. Joe Burrow was 1-9 or 1-7 in his career in week 1 prior to this, and he showed that he's turning a leaf. Joe Burrow showed he is turning a leaf by winning this game in week 1. I know it was against the Browns, who are probably one of the worst teams in the NFL, but a win is a win, and that's all that matters at the end. Diving into another AFC matchup, we're going to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the New York Jets. Sorry about that, guys. Throat's a little dry from yelling so much. But, again, Pittsburgh Steelers versus the New York Jets. First thing I'll tell you is kudos to Aaron Rodgers for still having something left in the tank. I had my doubts. And I would say he didn't really have like the most amazing game. His stats tell a different story. He threw for 4 touchdowns in this game. He got sacked 4 times too, and he just kept going, right? He's an old quarterback, and he was getting hit pretty hard. And he stuck in there, and he extended plays, and he made key plays when he needed to. Because the other thing I'll say is their run game is not good. Their run game struggled, and I expect it to struggle throughout this season. This wasn't just they were playing against a tough Jets defense. They don't have a really good running game. They also don't have a good offensive line. Right? Rodgers, again, he was getting hit early and often in this game. He was constantly being rushed. He has to get the ball out so fast, and he's really good at that. But he also had some big plays, right? He threw the ball down the field a couple times, and in each of those situations, they took advantage of it. And so, as a Steelers fan, you have to be happy with this win. Justin Fields on the Jets side had a great game. I think if you're a Jets fan, you have to be pretty excited about what Justin Fields did out there. Now, they didn't find a way to win the game at the end of the game. I was really shocked to see Garrett Wilson drop that pass. He did get crushed by Jalen Ramsey at the end of the game in order to drop the ball. But that's a must-catch situation if you're Garrett Wilson. You have to catch that ball to keep the drive going because, again, the Steelers are the type of team, and I'll say this, completely opposite of the Ravens, that find ways to win nitty-gritty games. They find ways to win in key situations. And that is the calling card of a Mike Tomlin. That's how he's able to have the record he has as a head coach. Again, getting back to the Jets a little bit, I think they still have to be happy with how their team performed given the situation. Right? Justin Fields, to me, performed at a pretty high level. He managed that game really well. He ran the ball when he needed to, and he connected with his receivers on multiple occasions in crucial situations. The Steelers just found a way to really gut that win out and win at the end of this game. This was another nail-biter, right? So I think both teams have to be happy with how this game went. Again, I'll give my flowers to Aaron Rodgers for throwing his 4 touchdowns. I'm curious to see how much he's able to sustain this throughout the season, given the fact that he is older and he's only going to get more bumps, more bruises. He's gonna be struggling from that sense throughout the season. But again, you have to be happy if you're the Steelers, and I don't think you're too mad if you're the Jets about how this game ended. Another quarterback I want to talk about, and to me, I don't think anyone expected this one. Maybe a couple people will come out of the woodworks and tell me I'm wrong, but how about Geno Smith? Geno Smith proved all the doubters wrong, including myself. He travels to the East Coast and finds a way to win in Foxborough against a really good culture and a really good coach in Mike Vrabel. I'm a huge believer and a huge fan of Mike Vrabel. And Geno Smith found a way to beat this team. Oh, by the way, this was with a struggling Ashton Jeanty. Ashton Jeanty had 19 carries for 38 yards in this game. That is not the type of performance you expect out of a running back that you drafted in the top 10, right? Everyone is expecting and hoping that Jeanty is going to be a 100-yard-a-game sort of running back with at least 1 touchdown. That is probably the minimal expectations you have for someone like an Ashton Jeanty. And for Geno Smith to go into Foxborough and have the performance he had of over 362 passing yards against a Patriots defense, that is just insanely impressive. I am so happy for Geno Smith. This completely changes the trajectory for me of what the Las Vegas Raiders can do. Right? Pete Carroll is proving he was right in the sense of bringing Geno Smith to Las Vegas with him. Because I think everyone was kind of looking at this as a year where they're just taking a step forward if you're the Las Vegas Raiders. But again, Geno Smith showed, hey, I'm here to win. Right? Going from the West Coast to the East Coast for an early game is not easy to do. More often than not, those West Coast teams traveling to the East Coast for early games, they lose, regardless of how good they are. It just happens because it's just such a time change. It's a very difficult competitive environment from that perspective. Now, on the Patriots side, again, what I will say is, TreVeyon Henderson for the Patriots didn't have the game that I expected. Travion Henderson ran the ball 5 times for 27 yards. So both of these rookie running backs had what I would consider to be a bad game. They underperformed in both situations. Now, Brock Bowers, he started off where he left off for the Raiders, right? He was the leading receiver for the Raiders in this game, and he was a huge reason why I think Geno Smith was able to be successful. So they have to be really happy about that, right? Brock Bowers is going to be Brock Bowers. Again, he's a top tight end in this league. I have Dalton Kincaid a little bit ahead of him, but I think Brock Bowers is right there. That guy is going to help this Raiders team win games. And again, if you're the Raiders, you have to be happy. If you're the Patriots, you have to kind of look at things and say, we need to make some – I don't know if they need to make some changes, but they need more out of Drake May. I don't think Drake May had nearly the game that he was hoping for or what the team was hoping for from that perspective. I'll go into his stats real quick for you. Drake May threw 30 times. He was 30 for 46 for 287 yards, so that sounds good. And he had 1 touchdown and 1 interception. But again, even Mike Vrabel said this to Drake May in the preseason in training camp. This clip has gone pretty viral. He goes, "How many times did you guys get in the end zone last year?" Not enough is the answer. Not enough. And scoring 13 points at home against a Raiders team who I don't think anyone is expecting them to be a prolific defense. They proved some people wrong, right? They got 4 sacks in that game. That's impressive. You just got to be happy if you're the Raiders and you went into Foxborough and won this game. Again, while you're in here, please comment below. Tell me what you thought about the Week 1 games. Who's your team? How did they do in this game? What are you looking forward to in this Monday Night Football game? Comment below, chat, tell me what you think. Next, we're going to dive into this Lions-Packers game. I think a lot of people were excited about how the Lions performed in probably one way. They moved the ball well, right? But similar to the Patriots, the Lions just couldn't find a way to score. Right? They would move the ball down the field and then just get completely halted, either just out of field goal range or just in field goal range, and just weren't able to get into the end zone. I know a lot of people are going to look at this game and say, this is what happens when you lose an offensive and defensive coordinator for the Lions, and this is the type of impact, Ben Johnson had on this sort of offense, right? I think this was a game where you could just see the struggles, you could see the disconnect between the Lions offense that made it so they were just extremely inconsistent. That's what really hurt them. They were just inconsistent. Again, they would get the ball into the red zone, and sometimes even on the goal line, and the Packers defense just tightened up, and they didn't make mistakes, and they would stop them, right? Micah Parsons, he got his first sack as a Packer. You got to be happy for him. I was concerned considering the fact he was having these back issues, and people were talking about his spinal injury. But at the same time, again, the Packers defense did what they needed to do. And on the Packers offensive side, they did a great job in the run and in the pass as well. I thought the Packers team, I was a little bit more hesitant and I'm less bullish on the Packers than most people are. Right? I think when Micah Parsons went to Green Bay, everyone sort of immediately said, "Oh, this is an instant playoff team. This is an instant Super Bowl team." I wasn't necessarily there, and you look at what Jordan Love did. He was 16 for 22, 188 yards and 2 touchdowns. Josh Jacobs, he ran the ball for 66 yards and a touchdown. So those numbers aren't insane numbers, right? That's not close to Josh Allen's 394 passing yards. But at the same time, they capitalized on all of their opportunities. They scored when they needed to score, and the only lone touchdown that the Lions had was at the end of the game with Isaac Tesla, their third round pick, who had an amazing catch, toe tapping catch in the end zone. But again, to me, I have a little bit more concern about the Lions than I thought. I have the Lions as a Super Bowl favorite. That was my prediction going into the season. And I know this is week 1, right? We're all going to overreact a little bit here, but to me, they have a little bit more of a disconnect than I expected. I thought that Jared Goff, who'd been in the system for a while, David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs. Well, let's talk about Jahmyr Gibbs really fast. Jahmyr Gibbs probably had the worst game of his career in this game, right? He had the touches. He had 9 carries for 19 yards, though. And that includes a 14-yard run. So he had 9 carries for 19 yards. He also had a 14-yard run in this. So do the math there. He had a lot of either negative yards or 1 to no yard gains on his runs. David Montgomery, probably comparably the same, right? David Montgomery, 11 carries for 25 yards. That's not going to cut it, especially in this NFC North. This NFC North is a tough division. We're going to see the Vikings and the Bears tonight, but the Packers, they're obviously a true contending team. And the Lions, if they want any chance of being a contender and having hopes of making the playoffs, they cannot have the type of performances they had. Sam Laporta, I would say, was probably the best player on the Lions offense. He had 79 yards receiving. But then you look at, Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's supposed to be their wide receiver 1, he had 45 yards. What does that tell you? To me, again, it's inconsistency, and there's a disconnect there. There's a lot of kinks this Lions team needs to work out, and the Packers need to work out some things as well. Again, they didn't have stellar stats either. It's not like they were running the ball all over the Lions. It's not like they were able to throw, just launching the ball downfield to players like Matt Golden and Romeo Doubs and Jaden Reed, right? They're dinks and dunks. I think the longest catch was 48 yards, which is a solid catch, but that's just one of those, right? Romeo Doubs, he had a 48-yard catch, and he had 68 yards total. So again, it's not like this Packers team was just blowing the Lions out of the water, but they took advantage of every situation they needed to. That's the biggest difference between a winning team and a losing team, right? I'll go back to the Ravens-Bills game. The Bills took advantage of every single situation they needed to in order to win that game. They found a way to win, and the Ravens found a way to give it away. And I'm not saying the Lions did exactly what the Ravens did, but again, you can't find ways to lose games. You have to take advantage of every opportunity you get in the NFL. That is why this is the best league in all of sports. The talent level is there, and you have to make the right decisions. Let's dive into the Giants-Commanders game. Another in-division game. And the first thing you have to say about this game is Jackson Dart already going to start for the Giants? Right? To me, that's the biggest thing I'm wondering is Jackson Dart going to be called up to be the starting quarterback for the Giants week 2? Brian Daboll was very non-committal about what he was going to do going into week 2 after that game. Russell Wilson, he did not do what he needed to do. He actually probably did less than what he needed to do to sustain this job. They gave him a $10 million contract. That's nothing for a quarterback nowadays. There's probably some backups that are close to getting paid that much in the NFL right now. And so to me, there's not a lot of big reasons to keep Russell Wilson as the starting quarterback for this team. Now, what I will say is they didn't necessarily do well in the run game either. Russell Wilson was their leading rusher with 44 yards, right? They lost this game 6-21 to the Commanders. And when you compare what Russell Wilson did to what Jaden Daniels did, it's night and day. Jaden Daniels obviously has that talent. He has the ability, and he knows how to manage a game and move the ball down the field. Russell Wilson used to be that guy, but to me it's clear if you're not going to be able to perform and you're going to put 6 points up on the board, there's no reason to have you in this game, right? You're a placeholder for Jackson Dart. That is all you are, and you just became a much smaller placeholder for them because to me, there's no reason to keep you in there. Malik Neighbors, he had 71 yards. Wan'Dale Robinson, he had 55 yards. I think a lot of people are looking at that and saying they have so much more talent on this offensive side than what they showed. But again, how long are they going to keep Jackson Dart in here? Now on the Commander side, again, you have to be happy with what Jaden Daniels did. Jaden Daniels performed at a pretty high level. Again, he didn't blow anything out of the water, but he had 300 total yards of offense in this game. The other standout in what is very clear to me from a Commander's perspective is Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt, the seventh round pick for the Commanders. He's going to be the main running back for this team. I didn't really understand why they let go of Brian Robinson, but they clearly saw something and liked what they saw out of Ja'Cory. And to me, he showed that he deserves this spot. He ran the ball 10 times for 82 yards and had a touchdown in this game. That is way better than what Ashton Genty did. That is way better than what Travion Henderson did in their debuts. So you got to be really happy if you're the Commanders and you got Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt in the 7th round, right? This guy played one game at Arizona in his I guess you could consider his final season. So this was to me very much a shot in the dark. But Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt proved the fact that he does belong in the NFL and he should be. He has the right to be the starting running back for this Washington Commanders team. Now, going back to the Giants really fast. What I will say from a defensive perspective, I was thinking that they were going to get a better pass rush on the Commanders. You have to give your props to Jaden Daniels, but also that offensive line. I was thinking Abdul Carter, Brian Burns, and Kayvon Thibodeau would each have at least 1 sack in this game. I was considering this to be a game where they were going to have the Giants should put up at least 5 sacks in this game. And they ended up with 3, right? Abdul Carter, I think he played an all right game. It wasn't what I was expecting out of him. I have really high hopes for Abdul Carter. I thought he was going to blow the Micah Parsons numbers out of the water from a rookie edge rushing perspective. I just think he has that sort of talent and ability. He did have a half a sack in this game, and he did have, and this was part of it, like a tackle for a loss. But again, I'm looking at someone like Abdul Carter and saying you should have the ability to get at least 2 sacks in this game. Something that was really interesting to me, and I watched this a couple times, they would have Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Abdul Carter out there at the same time, and they would have Abdul Carter play inside a little bit. I was a little bit shocked by that. I figured they would try to use Abdul Carter more on the outside in those situations, but he was playing almost like a defensive end or defensive tackle inside of either Thibodeau or Burns. And so again, to me, if you want to win as the Giants, you need that pass rush to be electric. You need this pass rush to get to the quarterback a lot if you want to win games as a Giants team, because again, the rest of your team is a little bit lackluster. You have a good receiving core, you don't have a good running game, and if you're not starting Jackson Dart and you have a Russell Wilson who throws for 168 yards, you're not going to win games that way. Next game I'm going to go into, this would be the Seahawks and the 49ers. And again, a game to me that was a little bit surprising, maybe not as surprising as I should have. I guess I had higher hopes for Sam Darnold and what he was going to be able to do for the Seahawks in this game. But again, to me, I think people need to keep an eye out for what Sam Darnold is doing in Seattle, in which Sam Darnold shows up. Because to me, he did not have a good game at all. To me, Sam Darnold probably had one of the worst performances out of any of the quarterbacks in the NFL this first week. I truly think that. I was watching this game, and all I could say to myself was, is this the Panthers and the Jets Sam Darnold that I'm seeing? Because he was 16 for 23 for 150 yards. Right? 150 yards on 23 attempts is not going to get you anywhere. You're not going to win any games that way, especially when you can't run the ball. That's the other aspect of this team is they could not run the ball on this 49ers defense. And the 49ers defense, they lost a lot of crucial players. Now, on the other side, I'd say Brock Purdy, he did what he needed to do to win this game. Right? This wasn't a pretty game. It was 17-13. Purdy had 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, but he was moving the ball down the field, especially with the team where they had so many question marks on the receiving side. I'll also give my flowers to Ricky Pearsall. Ricky Pearsall had over 100 yards in this game. I did not know what to expect out of him because last year was just such a odd year for a player who got shot before the season even started, and he missed games from that, and then he also had some injuries like bumps and bruises. But Ricky Pearsall really showed up, and when I heard George Kittle went down with a hamstring injury, I know George Kittle got a touchdown early on, but when I knew he was out for the whole second half, I could have guaranteed you the Seahawks were going to win this game. But again, Ricky Pearsall, he did what he needed to do. Christian McCaffrey also had what I would consider to be a good game in his books. Like, especially with the question marks of Christian McCaffrey going into this game, he ran for 69 yards, and he also caught the ball for 73 yards, right? So he had production in both sides of this game, and again, a huge factor in why the 49ers were able to narrowly win this game. On the other side, Jackson Smith-Njigba, he's exactly what I thought and was hoping for. He had 9 receptions for 124 yards. Right, so he was the majority of Sam Darnold's passing offense. After him it was Cooper Kupp with 15 yards. So I'm a little concerned about this Seahawks team. To me, I thought that the 49ers were going to have another down year, and there's still an opportunity that happens. But again, I actually picked the Seahawks to win this division, and so I was clearly wrong about this. Hey, bad takes from bad takes in football. That is me, but that was the shot I took, and clearly I was wrong from that perspective. So again, congratulations to the 49ers. Winning that game with the amount of injuries you have is extremely impressive. Shanahan obviously dialed up a really good offense in order to keep them in that W column. Now, I'll talk about the Rams and Texans game. What I will say is, to me, this was a snoozer of a game. C.J. Stroud struggled under pressure. Tell me what's new. He was sacked 3 times. They just couldn't move the ball. They had just over 300 yards of offense. And to me, Matt Stafford, he held in there strong, and he was able to get the ball down the field. It just, not a lot of points, came from this game. Again, they had a 350 yards of offense, and the biggest takeaway I have from this game is congratulations to Matt Stafford for getting over 60,000 yards in your career. Right? He's 10th overall in the history of the NFL when it comes to passing yards, and he did just what he needed to do in order to win this game. Again, the Texans, I'm worried if I'm a Texans fan because C.J. Stroud, everyone talks about how he had like a down year last year, and I think a lot of people expected them to turn that around this year. But they scored 9 points, right? C.J. Stroud, he threw for 188 yards and an interception. No touchdowns. They had no touchdowns at all. No rushing touchdowns, no receiving touchdowns, just field goals. And that is, I don't care who you play, you're going to lose all of your games if that's the amount of points you're putting up. the Rams have a really good young defense. I'll say that. Jared Verse is an amazing player. I'm a big fan of Braden Fisk. But, if you're Nick Chubb, if you're CJ Stroud, you got to have a better game than this, right? The receiving core, I think a lot of people thought Nico Collins was going to have a repeat of last year. Nico Collins had 3 catches for 25 yards in this game. That is not the production you need. Jaden Higgins, their rookie receiver, was their top target or their top receiver with 32 yards on 2 catches. Right? That's the difference between Nico Collins and Jaden Higgins is 7 yards. Their first receiver to their 5th receiver was 5 yards. Again, the top receiver, 32 yards for the Texans. You're in the AFC South. You have a opportunity to go out there and win a division and secure a spot in the playoffs. And I'm looking at this week of games. The Jaguars won. The Colts won, right? As the Texans, you got to maintain. You have to win games like this. I know this was in LA, but again, like the Rams, they're still, to me, Matt Stafford is just such a question mark with his back. You have to take advantage of games like this, and scoring 9 points is not going to be enough for them. So, again, I'm concerned if I'm the Texans. They need to turn this around. They have a brand new offensive line, and all I can say is, they gave up 3 sacks, not terrible numbers, but still, clearly their offense was not able to move that ball. Let's dive into the Tampa Bay game. Now, Tampa Bay against Atlanta Falcons, right? So this is an NFC South matchup. What I have to say about this game is Baker Mayfield shows he can win games in crunch time. I am so happy for Baker Mayfield. I'll say this. I wasn't a huge fan of Baker when he was on the Browns. I just felt like he was a little bit too cocky, and I hated the fact that he saw success and just went into like 30 different commercials right afterwards. But, to me, he put up solid numbers. He put up solid points. He threw for 3 touchdowns in this game. Emeka Egbuka, I called this, and I'm not saying I'm the only one that called this, but he is an absolute stud. Emeka Egbuka will be the wide receiver 1 for this team for years to come. He had 4 catches for 67 yards and 2 touchdowns in this game. Now, 67 yards, you're looking at that's not insane numbers. But when he caught them and the amount of impact those catches had on this game, including 2 touchdowns, was absolutely huge. That is an amazing rookie debut, right? I talked about Ashton Genty. I talked about Travion Henderson. A lot of these rookies struggled, right? A lot of these rookies struggled. But Emeka Egbuka proved why he was a first-round pick, and I'm happy for him. Now, Bijan Robinson on the other side, right, he struggled in the run. He had 27 yards, but he had 100 yards receiving. So he was actually Penix's favorite target. And, the other thing I'll say about the Falcons is I can now understand why you didn't play Penix in the preseason. I was skeptical, right? I didn't fully believe, just based off of the record and the performance that Penix had last season with 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions to end last season. I didn't understand why they were so confident in Penix. But that guy's a player. He's a game-time player. He had that 1 rush for a touchdown where he's essentially dragging a defender behind him, and he's able to stay up and get the ball into the end zone. And that is a quintessential point to show this is a gamer right here. This is the type of quarterback that is going to win you games if you're the Atlanta Falcons. Now, I'll also say he's very calm, he's very collected, and he just made the right decisions, right? Michael Penix made the right decisions in this game, and again, he was cool, calm, and collected throughout this game. I was extremely impressed with Michael Penix and how he played. Now, on the contrary, Koo, their kicker, who seemingly always finds a way to hit game-winning field goals, missed an easy 42-yarder to win this game, right? That to me was probably the most shocking part of this game. I think any Falcons fan and any avid NFL fan will tell you, oh, Koo wins, he kicks game-winning field goals. That's what this guy does. This is an automatic kick. And he just wasn't able to do that, and that ended up being the deciding factor in this game. One last thing I'll say on this game before I move on is the fact that Pitts also showed up. He showed signs that he does. Penix was saying he was going to throw the ball to Pitts fairly often. I didn't necessarily believe it. I thought it was just like him trying to give confidence to Kyle Pitts. But Kyle Pitts had a pretty solid game out there. I will say that. And so maybe it's time to look at things and say, hey, maybe Pitts does have a chance in this offense with Michael Penix as the quarterback. Next, we'll go into the Panthers-Jaguars game. All right, when it comes to this Panthers-Jaguars game, the first thing I'll say is Bryce Young essentially started this game the same way he started last season, and that is not a good thing. I think I myself, as well as pretty much any Panthers fan out there, was really hoping that he was going to get momentum. Right? I think every Panthers fan was hoping he would have the momentum from those last regular season games going into this game against a Jaguars team who had the second worst defense in the NFL last year. And Bryce Young had 154 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. And the touchdown that he threw was at the end of the game, right? This was a garbage touchdown. And so to me, again, he was making mistakes. He just didn't look confident in the backfield, right? I'm looking at this game, and to me, I'm not looking at this saying like, oh wow, the Jaguars defense is putting a lot of pressure on him. They had 1 sack in this game, right? To me, Bryce Young just did not look like a NFL quarterback out there. And I'm not saying that as a hater because I want Bryce Young to be good. I live in Charlotte. I love it when the Panthers are good because there's just like a buzz around the city. People are excited. People are happy. And Bryce Young is making people second guess this again. He has the wide receiving core now, right? Ted McMillan, he caught the ball 5 times for 68 yards. He had some really big catches in this game. But again, as a team, they just couldn't convert, right? Xavier Legette, he's got to make another step. I'll say that right now. Xavier Legette does not look like the type of guy that they drafted last year. He had some crucial plays where there was one play where he could have easily caught the ball in bounds, but he just wasn't paying attention to his feet, and he put 1 foot down in bounds, and he didn't toe tap, right? He just kept his stride what it was, and his other foot landed out of bounds. And that was like in a crucial 3rd down situation. And it's just situations like that where you can't do that as a wide receiver in the NFL. You can't do that if you're trying to be the wide receiver 2 in the NFL. And so again, for me, if I'm the Panthers, I'm looking at this game and I'm saying, please don't happen again. We cannot have the same start to this season that we did last season, because if you continue like this, you're going to be reconsidering Bryce Young, and you're also going to be reconsidering Canales, right, the head coach. I think people had a lot of hopes as a Panthers fan going into this season, and to me, they just can't move the ball. This offense is just, it's not explosive, it's not exciting, and it's not going to win the Panthers games in even like an easy division. Right, that's the other part of this, is they were playing the Jags. Now, on that point, I'll go over and what I'll say is, props to Trevor Lawrence for winning this game. I wouldn't say he had like a really good game in this game, but he also didn't have a bad game in this game, right? He was a game manager in this situation. Really, the standout player to me for the Jaguars was Travis Etienne. Travis Etienne was, I think, deemed to be a bust after last season. Last season, he really struggled for the Jaguars. I can tell you that from a personal perspective. I have him on my fantasy team. There's people trying to trade me to get Travis Etienne. They're trying to throw Jerome Ford at me. Like, that's how bad of a season Travis Etienne had. And he answered the questions. He had 150 yards for the Jaguars, and he had a run. He almost had 150 yards. I think he had like 146, 141, but he had one run for like 71 yards. Right? He showed up and he moved that ball for this Jaguars offense. Again, he was definitely the MVP of the Jaguars, in my opinion, in this game. I think everyone was expecting Tank Bigsby to take over in a big way for the Jaguars. But Travis Etienne said, hey, bud, I'm still here, and I have something to say about that. So I'm happy for the Jaguars and for Travis Etienne to get this win. If Trevor Lawrence figures out a few things and just makes some better decisions and gets rid of the ball a little bit faster, I think this team could actually turn some heads because, again, the AFC South is super weak. That is very clear to me. And they have an opportunity to make the playoffs as a divisional win. So that's all I really wanted to cover in today's show. Again, I'm doing these lives Monday and Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. I might change it. Tell me if you think I should change this to a little bit like after work hours so that more people can join in. I want more people to be able to chime in with comments, chime in the chat. Tell me what you thought about the games. But Mondays, I'll be doing a recap of what happened that week in the Sunday games, as well as going into the Monday night game. On Wednesdays, I'll be doing a preview of the next week games, as well as any other topics that you want me to cover. So again, I'm doing lives every Monday and Wednesday at 1 p.m. If you can subscribe, like, comment, tell me what other topics you might want me to discuss. If there's other stories that aren't being covered by the big media heads that you want me to dive into, I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to give my take on anything, whether it's good or bad. I appreciate your time today. Thank you again for tuning in to Bad Takes in Football. This is your host, Bad Takes, signing out.